My father said. "Marcus, go check the driveway." Those 6 words. That was how it started. It was the Thursday of Thanksgiving week, and the family had gathered in the house on Whitestone Drive the way we always did. My aunt with her green bean casserole, my uncle who only talked about property values, my mother cycling between the kitchen and the dining room with the focused efficiency she reserved for holidays. I had driven 40 minutes from my apartment at Millfield Commons. I brought 2 bottles of wine. Nobody mentioned them. I sat at the far end of the table between my aunt and an empty chair. Marcus sat closer to the center. He always did, and when my father said those 6 words, Marcus pushed back from his seat like he'd been waiting for a signal. The front door opened. A cold draft rolled in off the porch. Then Marcus made a sound I had never heard from him, something that started high and then went quiet, like it ran out of air before it found the shape of a word. My uncle stood up to look. My aunt followed. My mother said, "Go see, everyone, go on," in the voice she saved for moments she had already rehearsed. I stood and walked to the door. At the end of the driveway, under the one working streetlight, sat a BMW sedan. Silver, the kind that looked white until light caught it sideways. On the hood, centered and tied in an actual bow, was a red velvet ribbon. I touched the edge of it as I walked past on my way back inside. My fingertips came away damp from the cold November air. My mother called from behind me. "Come back inside. There's something for you too." I turned around. She handed me a small wrapped box at the table. I opened it carefully. Inside was a plastic piggy bank, the kind sold near grocery checkout lanes, with 2 folded dollar bills tucked through the coin slot. My father said, "For the saver in the family." He laughed. Marcus laughed from the doorway. My uncle raised his glass. I set the piggy bank down on the tablecloth beside my untouched wine and looked at it for a moment. "My name is Renata. I'm 29 years old. I work as a staff accountant at a mid-sized logistics firm in Columbus, and I have a 1-bedroom apartment in Millfield Commons that I have paid for on my own since I was 24. I grew up in the house on Whitestone Drive. I know every creak of that house. I know which drawer in the kitchen sticks in July and moves freely in December. I know the circuit breaker in the basement trips if you run the microwave and the toaster at the same time. I know these things because I spent 18 years there, and because I kept coming back after I left, and because when something needed handling, I was the one who handled it. Marcus is 3 years older than me. He is 32. He has worked, over the years, in restaurant supply, in insurance, in something he called consulting for a year and a half that nobody in the family ever fully explained. He has never lived alone for longer than a few months. He moved from our parents' house to a place with a girlfriend, from there to an apartment our father co-signed for, from that apartment back to our parents' house, and then into a rental my mother mentioned at Easter without giving me the address. When Marcus needed a car at 22, our parents bought him a used sedan. When the sedan broke down at 28, our father lent him money for a replacement. I have no record of repayment. What I have is a memory of sitting at this same table 4 years ago when my mother said, "Marcus is going through a hard time. Family helps family." I nodded. I said I understood. I did not need a car at 22. I had taken out my own loan from my own credit union and paid it off in 31 months. I did not mention this at the table then, and I did not mention it now. This is the thing about being the practical one in a family that has decided its roles. It is not a compliment. Practical is the word used to explain why you get less. It means you'll figure it out. It means you have your own. It means there is nothing left to give you because you never appeared to need giving. I had heard the word so many times that I had stopped hearing it most days. Most days. There was a version of myself that might have said something when she slid that box across the table. That version would have pointed at the driveway and asked what the car cost. She would have named a number. She would have connected the dots out loud, in front of everyone, with the clarity that comes from doing financial work for a living. I was not that version. I folded my hands on the tablecloth and listened to my father ask Marcus what color interior he'd wanted. Marcus said he had asked for black, but the silver exterior looked better than he expected. Something sat low and still in the center of me, waiting for a shape. 14 months before that Thanksgiving, my father called me on a Tuesday afternoon. I was at my desk finishing a month-end close for a client. My father did not call on weekday afternoons. That was unusual enough that I answered on the second ring. He asked how I was. I said fine. There was a pause, the kind that meant he was getting to something. We need a favor, he said. A family thing. Marcus needs a vehicle. His credit isn't where it needs to be right now. I waited. If you co-sign a loan, it's just your name on the paperwork. You wouldn't be responsible for the payments. He'd take them over directly within 60 days. I asked what the loan was for. A reliable vehicle, he said. Nothing extravagant. Just something to get him to work and back. I told him I'd think about it. He called again 2 days later and said the dealership was holding the pricing through the end of the month. I asked to see the paperwork first. What he sent was a DocuSign link with the terms pre-filled. The vehicle was described as a BMW 330i. The purchase price was $61,340. I called him back. I said, "Dad, this is $61,000. He said, "The payments are manageable with your profile. Your credit will handle it fine." I said I wasn't sure this was a good idea. He said, "Renata, family helps family." I signed. The loan servicer sent an account confirmation. Monthly payment, $847. I set up autopay from my checking account. The dealership mailed a key fob to my address, black, BMW logo, the original keyring still attached. I put it in the drawer by the front door. My father said Marcus would take the payments over within 60 days. By month 3, no transfer had arrived. I texted my father. He said Marcus was in a transition. I texted again at month 5. He said things were stabilizing. I stopped texting about it and kept paying. 14 months. 14 payments of $847. That is $11,858. Somewhere in those 14 months, I also covered the copay when my mother had dental work done and asked if I could float her until the insurance reimbursement came through. I paid for my aunt's flight when she couldn't make it to my grandmother's service without help. I showed up on a Saturday in March and helped my father re-drywall the basement hallway and stayed until 9 that night. None of these were called loans. None of them were called favors either. They were simply what happened when you were the one in the family who had things handled. I kept no record. There was no spreadsheet. I am an accountant, which means I understand precisely how these things accumulate, and I also know that putting numbers to them in a family context feels like a particular kind of accusation. So I kept no record. I kept a sense of things the way you carry a number without writing it down. 14 months. $11,858. A red velvet bow on a car I had been buying for over a year. I went still at the table. Not suddenly, the way a room cools when the heat goes off without announcement. My uncle was still talking. Something about the dealership, about the salesman, about the test drive. Marcus was nodding in the particular way he nodded when he was not really listening but wanted credit for it. My father leaned back in his chair with the ease of a man who believed the evening had gone exactly as intended. I looked at the front window, then at my mother, then at my father. The room had gone quiet the way a room goes before something permanent is said. "Which loan?" I said. "Is that car on?" My father looked up from his plate. "What?" "The BMW," I said. 14 months ago, I signed a loan for a BMW 330i. Is that the car in the driveway? The table went quiet in increments. My uncle stopped talking. My aunt looked at my mother. My mother set her fork down without resting it on the edge of her plate. My father said, "Don't make this into a thing." I said, "I'm asking which car." He said, "That's Marcus's car. He's been taking care of it." I said, "I've been making the payments. Every month. From my account." My mother said, "Renata, we're having dinner." I said, "I've paid $847 a month for 14 months. I want to know if any of that has come from Marcus." My father's voice stayed level. "Marcus has been going through a transition. You knew that when you agreed to help. My aunt moved her plate half an inch. Nobody else moved. I said, I agreed to co-sign a loan for a reliable vehicle. You told me he'd take the payments over in 60 days. I'm looking at a $61,000 car with a bow on it. My mother said, You're being ungrateful. Your brother needed a start. You have your car, you have your apartment, you have your job. What else do you need? I looked at her. I didn't answer for a moment. Then I said, I've paid close to $12,000 into a loan for a car that was just handed to my brother as a gift. I'd like to understand where that money went. Marcus said, I was going to pay you back. He was not looking at me. He turned his fork in his hand and set it down on the tablecloth. I said, When? He said, When I got more settled. I said, What would settled look like? He said, Come on. Don't do this here. Marcus pushed his chair back a few inches. The legs caught on the rug and stopped. I said, I'm not doing anything. I'm asking a question. My father said, You signed the paperwork. You agreed to help. You can't come back now and act like we misled you. I said, You told me he'd take over in 60 days. My father said, I said that, yes. Things changed. You know how things are with Marcus. My aunt cleared her throat. Nobody looked at her. Outside, a car door closed somewhere on the street. No one turned toward the window. My mother said, She always does this. Every holiday. Something has to be about her. I did not respond to that. My father picked up his glass and set it back down without drinking. My father said, Your brother needed something to get on his feet. You've always been the capable one. You don't need the same things he needs. My mother's voice shifted into the softer register, which was somehow harder to hear than when it was flat. You're the strong one, Renata. You've always landed on your feet. We've never had to worry about you the way we worry about Marcus. Something went solid in my chest. Not anger, not bitterness, something quieter and heavier than both of those, like a stone settling at the floor of still water. I picked up the napkin from my lap. I folded it along the existing crease. I set it beside my plate. I'm going to head home, I said. My father said, You're going to walk out on Thanksgiving. I said, Good night. My mother said, If you leave right now. I pushed back my chair. It made a sound on the hardwood. I went to the hook by the door and took my coat. I did not say anything else. I pulled the front door closed behind me, quietly, the way you close a door in a house where someone is sleeping. The BMW sat at the end of the driveway under the streetlight. The red velvet bow had slipped sideways on the hood. I looked at it once as I walked to my car. I got in, backed into the street, and drove. In my rearview mirror, the car was silver. The drive back to Millfield Commons took 40 minutes. I parked in the covered lot and walked up to my apartment. I turned on the kitchen light. I put my coat on the chair by the door. I set my bag on the counter. I opened my laptop. I navigated to the loan servicer website. I typed my login credentials. The account loaded. Under primary borrower, Renata Kowalski. My address at Millfield Commons. Under co-borrower, no entry. I scrolled to the payment history. 14 rows. Each one showed the same date, the 8th of every month. Each one showed the same source, my checking account. I read the page a second time. I took a screenshot with my phone. I closed the laptop. I went to the refrigerator and opened it. I looked inside for a moment, then closed it. I filled a glass of water at the sink and set it on the counter without drinking it. I sat down in the chair by the window. Outside, the parking lot was lit by 2 orange overhead lights. A car pulled in slowly and parked in the row across from mine. Someone got out, walked toward the building entrance, and disappeared into the stairwell door. I sat there for a while. At 2:14 a.m., I picked up my phone. I opened my contacts. I blocked my mother's number. I blocked my father's. I blocked Marcus. I set the phone face down on the windowsill. I did not turn it over again until morning. 3 days later, on a Sunday morning, my phone showed a missed call from a number I didn't recognize. There was a voicemail. I played it while the coffee was brewing. My mother's voice. She sounded calm in the particular way she sounded calm when she had rehearsed what she was going to say. Renata. This is your mother. I need you to call me back. Your father and I have been discussing the situation, and we need you to understand that car belongs to Marcus. It has always belonged to Marcus. If you think you can use that loan as some kind of leverage over this family, you need to reconsider. The car is at our house, and if you try to take it or interfere with Marcus having access to it in any way, we will contact the police and report it as stolen property. You should call me back before this becomes something none of us want. There was a pause. We raised you, she said. Remember that. The message ended. I set the phone down on the counter. I poured my coffee. I stood at the counter and drank the first half of it. Then I called the Franklin County BMW. I waited on hold for 11 minutes. A representative answered with a quiet, efficient voice and asked how she could help. I gave her the loan account number. She asked for my name and the last 4 digits of my social security number. She said, I have the registration pulled up. The vehicle is registered to Renata Kowalski. She read back my address at Millfield Commons. Is there something you need to update? I said, no. I just needed to confirm the registered owner. She said, that would be you, ma'am. Is there anything else I can help with? I thanked her and ended the call. I wrote down what she had said word for word in a notepad. Then I called an attorney, a family law and property attorney whose name I had found through my firm's HR resource directory. I reached her voicemail and left a message. She called back within the hour. I described the situation in plain terms. She asked me 2 questions. Then she said, if the vehicle is registered in your name and you are the primary borrower on the loan, you cannot be charged with taking possession of your own vehicle. The registration is the controlling document. If anyone contacts police, the first thing the responding officer will confirm is whose name is on the title. That name is yours. I thanked her. I saved her number. That afternoon, I drove to Whitestone Drive. I parked at the curb, not in the driveway. The BMW was where it had been on Thanksgiving, pulled up near the garage. The bow was gone. I walked to the car and stood beside it for a moment. I reached into the right pocket of my coat. I took out the key fob, black, BMW logo with the original dealership keyring still on it. I had carried it in this coat pocket since the day it arrived, the way you carry something you haven't decided what to do with yet. I unlocked my phone and opened the loan servicer app. I logged in. The account loaded, primary borrower, Renata Kowalski. Vehicle, 2024 BMW 330i, silver exterior. I turned the phone face up and laid it flat on the hood, screen visible. I took a photo of the screen and the car together in the same frame. I unlocked the car. I got in. I adjusted the driver's seat, it had been set for someone several inches taller. I moved the mirrors. I started the engine. The front door of the house opened. My father came out onto the porch. He stood there with his hands at his sides. I looked at him through the windshield. He said something. I couldn't hear him through the glass. I thought about what my mother had said at the table. That I was the strong one. That they never had to worry about me. That I didn't need the same things Marcus needed. She'd meant it as an explanation for 40 minutes. She had been using it as a policy for 29 years. The loan had my name on it. The title had my name on it. 14 payments had come from my account, every one of them, and the family had put a velvet bow on all of that and called it a gift to someone else and handed me $2 for being practical. I thought about what practical had cost me and what it had bought me and what the difference looked like from where I was sitting now. The key fob was in my right hand. I set it in the cup holder. I put the car in reverse and backed out slowly. My father was still on the porch when I reached the corner. I did not look back. 4 months later, I drove the BMW to the office on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I parked in the covered structure on West Broad Street, rode the elevator to the 7th floor, and sat at the same desk I had worked at for 4 years. Nothing about the route changed. The coffee shop where I stopped was the same. The roads were the same. The only difference was what was in the parking structure. In February, I refinanced the loan. The new agreement listed one borrower. The monthly payment was $831, $16 less than before, because my credit score had moved up in the months between. I set up the new autopay and received a confirmation email at 10:47 a.m. on a Wednesday. The attorney sent a follow-up email a week after our call. She charged nothing for the consultation, given the straightforwardness of the situation, and suggested I keep the vehicle registration and account documentation somewhere accessible. I printed both and put them in the glove compartment. 6 weeks after Thanksgiving, my mother called from a number I hadn't blocked. I answered because I didn't recognize it. She said she wanted to sort things out. I told her I wasn't ready for that. She said, "We're your family." I said, "I know." I said goodbye and hung up. I didn't block the number. I hadn't called it back. My father hadn't called. In January, Marcus sent a text, "You good?" I read it. I didn't reply. I didn't block him either. I just didn't reply. The car sat in the covered lot at Millfield Commons when I was home. Some evenings, when I went down to the parking level for something, I saw it in the corner spot under the orange overhead lights and thought about the driveway on Whitestone Drive and the streetlight and the bow that had already been slipping sideways. I bought a small steel keychain disc from a hardware kiosk at the grocery store, the kind you get engraved for a few dollars. I had my apartment number stamped on it. I clipped it to the BMW key fob and hung it on the hook by my front door, next to my building key and my office badge. It was the first thing I touched when I left in the morning and the last thing I set down when I came home. The name on the loan has always been mine. It took a while to understand what that meant. Not the legal part, I understood that. The other part. The part where you realize the thing that was always yours was never hidden from you. You were just the last one looking. If any of this sounds familiar, if you've been the one who signed and covered and showed up while someone else got the bow, share this. You're not alone in it.